Hey everyone, this is Devin Moreno here, and welcome to the Baltimore Investors Channel. And today, my friend and mentor is going to talk to you about the big debate, single-family homes versus multifamily. Now, admittedly, he has a portfolio of at least 50 single-family and multifamily combined houses, lots of different things. So he's very experienced in this market. He's been doing this for quite a while. So he, of course, likes both. But what are the big reasons he likes single-family homes? I know I have a lot of negatives against them, so let's go into him. He's a lot more experienced than me, so he can give a lot of good info. So let's go ahead and take it away with him.
Hey everyone, I'm here at one of our single family home projects that we just finished up. We just got through walking through some potential renters. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the single family home BRRRR strategy. And for those of you who don't know what a BRRRR is, it's a buy, renovate, rent, and refinance. So when we originally looked at this house, it had a fire in the upstairs, so you came in and you smelled smoke. And you can go and look at the video when we had the breakdown of the costs on the house. But I want to talk a little bit about what single family home advantages are versus a small multi-unit or maybe a large multi-unit property. So let's talk about single family. First off, what is a single family? A single family is a home that houses one family. It has one kitchen. It has as many bathrooms as you'd like, but it's meant and intended for one group of people to occupy it together. So the reasons why we want to invest in single families is because, one, you tend to have an easier time selling it. Think about just supply and demand. If you're going to be selling the house after you rent it for a long period of time, you want to have more people that you can sell it to. Typically, an investment property that has multiple units is going to be sold to another investor, whereas a single family home may be sold to a first-time home buyer or a move-up couple or whatever other tenant or people might be willing to buy it. Therefore, you have a lot more supply of people that could buy the property after you sell it. So typically, you get a little bit more equity growth in it and it's easier to sell, especially if you have a challenging investor market. Currently, we're in the times of the coronavirus, so it's interesting to look at things in terms of how much risk is there out there. And this we could sell to a single family home, a regular home buyer, whereas we couldn't sell to an investor as easily right now. So the second reason why you might want to invest in single family home properties is because it's easier to manage. If you think about management of multiple units, you've got, let's just say you have a 3-unit property and you've got a top tenant, a middle tenant, and a downstairs tenant. Think about what happens if maybe the downstairs person throws a party and you've got the person on the second floor and the third floor calling you and complaining. Whereas a single family home, they're not really complaining about anything. If they do, it's their neighbors that they know you have no control over. But if they're thinking about, hey, you also rent to the other people in the unit, they think maybe you can stop them from doing some behavior that they don't like or they don't appreciate. The third reason why you might want to invest in single family homes, especially from a renovation standpoint, is renovating a single family home is much easier than a multi-unit home. So if you think about all of the different things that go into a renovation, one of the big things being the permit process, it's much easier on a single family home versus a multi-unit. Specifically in Baltimore City, if you get 3 units or above, you have a whole different level of permitting and drawings that you need to submit to the city and things like that, whereas a single family home is relatively easy to go through and renovate. So for example, if you have a single family home, you're only going to have one electrical system. Whereas if you have a 3-unit property, you're going to have 3 separate electrical systems. When you go to have BG&E hook it up, you're going to go to a whole different division that is much slower versus if you're going on a single family home and you have 1 meter, they're used to doing this all the time, so it's much easier. Same thing with your gas from the utilities. If you have 3 separate whole gas systems, then it's going to be much more intense to get them on the line and things like that. I had a experience recently where I own a 3-unit property and we're getting a new gas line installed. And the new gas line installed, and the guys called me after they installed and said, hey, we usually set up the meter for this, but if it's more than 1 meter, it goes to a whole different division. So we've got to stop. You've got to call BG&E, who is our public utility here, again, And now we have to have a whole nother crew come out and install 3 meters versus if it would have been a single family home, they would have come in, installed the meter, I would have been good to go with my gas that day. Some of the other tricky things about renovating multi-units is a single family home, we have no fire separation because it's only one house. So the only thing we have to worry about is the house next door to each of us. And in Baltimore City where we live, and this is a row home, there's already brick that goes all the way up. So we don't have to worry about that. Whereas if this was a 2-unit property, we'd have to make sure that there was a fire stop in between both of the units. Usually what that means is that we have to have 2 layers of extra thick drywall. And then we also have to go with any penetrations that come through and have fire stop, which is a certain type of caulk that we need to use to keep any fire from going in through either floor if this unit were to catch fire. So one of the other challenges with multi-units versus single family homes is the ease of financing. So there's 2 times when you're gonna finance a property in a BRRRR renovation style. The first is when you originally purchase it, and then usually included with that is gonna be your renovation costs. And then the second is when you refinance it. Now there's big differences that we'll talk about in another video of buying and owning something in an LLC versus buying and owning something in your own name, which for the ease of talking today, we're just gonna talk about buying in your own name because the loan process is different. But in the purchase of buying the single family home, there are a lot of exit strategies which your lender is going to care about. And so your first exit strategy is you're gonna refinance the home. And this is gonna be what you're really intending to do is rent it and refinance it. Remember those R's from the BRRRR method? The second exit strategy is you could sell it. A single family home is really marketable, especially in a hot seller's market, and you should be able to sell it for a reasonable value that you're gonna get an appraisal for on the front end. So lenders really like to lend to single family homes, whereas on a multifamily, it may be much harder to sell, especially if you can't refinance it. That might mean that other investors would have a hard time refinancing it as well. Therefore, you'd have a much harder time getting that original loan. The second part of that is going to be the loan on the back end. So when you've actually done the renovation and you've rented it, now you've got to get this refinance loan on the back end. So to give you a couple terms, one term is loan to value, LTV. So on a multi-unit, if you're doing a cash out refinance, meaning you're getting your cash out and you're paying your other investors out, then you're limited to how much you can go on the LTV, the loan to value. So on a multi-unit, the max you can go is 70%. This is, again, if you're buying in your own name and you're using what we call a Fannie Freddie loan. So you go to a normal person that you might go to for your own home and you say, hey, I'd like a loan on this investment property. For a single family home, you can go up to 80%. So you have 10% more equity that you can get out of a single family home versus a multifamily home. The other part of that is it's going to be much easier to appraise a single family home because they're much more abundant. So think about this whole block that we have right here. There's at least 15 townhomes and they're all relatively the same size. And there's a block right next to it where there's 15 townhomes. They're all relatively the same size. The chances that you're going to be able to find a good comparison property to get a solid value is much higher than if we were on a block and we had a 3-unit, and usually they're not all multi-units, but there would be mixed in a single family home and another multi-unit. And in that case, it would be much harder to determine what is a fair appraised value for that 3-unit. So you're gonna be much more consistent on your renovation values with a single family home. You'll note in another video, we'll talk about that's one of the advantages of a multifamily home because you may be able to talk to the appraiser and get a higher value in a multi-unit property because there's not as much certainty as it's going to be worth this much because you do these things. So those are the reasons why I really like single family home investing compared to multi-unit investing. You've got an ease of management, you've got an ease of renovation, and financing is a lot simpler to get on these properties. So hope you all enjoyed today. Again, we'll do another segment on multi-units and what some of those advantages are as well. But that's why I love single family home investing.